Hello and welcome to Bolt Action Reloading. In today's video we're going to be doing some more load development with our Thompson Center Compass chambered in 300 Winchester Magnum. We're actually going to be using the Hornady 208 grain A-Max loaded with Hodgdon's H1000. Stick around. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here and you'd like to see how I and the rest of you here make our group smaller, start now by subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon. That way you get notified when I post new videos and you won't miss anything. Furthering our testing in 300 Winchester Magnum today, we are going to be using the 308 grain A-Max along with Hodgdon's H1000. Before we get too far, let's go over our test platform. This is our Thompson Center Compass chambered in 300 Winchester Magnum. We've replaced the plastic factory stock with the Boyds Pro Varmint laminated hardwood stock. This stock also has an adjustable comb height. To the action, we've added a 20 MOA EGW long action scope base. The scope we're using is a SWFA fixed 16 power scope, mil-mil, and it's currently wearing 30mm Seekins precision scope rings that we upgraded from the SWFA rings that we were previously using. It also is wearing an SWFA bubble level. The factory trigger has been upgraded with an MCARBO trigger spring kit to lower our trigger pull weight. We're also reducing our recoil with a Precision Armament M4-72 308 brake. At this point in our project, if you've been following it, you know we've done some velocity node workups with several powder bullet combinations. We've done some coal testing with the 220 grain Sierra Match King as well as the 220 grain Nosler Custom Competition. In previous videos, we've developed some velocity charts with several projectiles as well as done pressure testing, and that's what we will be continuing on with today. If you'd like to start this series from the beginning, I'll put a card up and you can check out that playlist, but feel free to join us right now and go back and watch that later. Like we've done in previous videos, we'll be using what I would call the Satterlee load development style today, so we will be loading in 0.3 grain increments all the way to max, looking for pressure signs on our brass, as well as paying close attention to what velocities we achieve to see if we can find any velocity nodes. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about where we're getting our load data from to find our starting points. If you guys are not familiar, this is the 208 grain A-Max by Hornady. The part number is 30732. As far as I'm aware, they've actually discontinued this projectile unless you can find it somewhere else. However, they do have a 208 grain ELD-M, which is probably similar, slightly higher ballistic coefficient. They've changed the tip out, but we're not going to get too deep down this rabbit hole. We've had these in stock, and we wanted to find out if they would shoot, so that's one of the reasons why we're using them in our load workup. However, as far as load data is concerned, we actually are getting our load data today straight from Hodgdon's website. Hodgdon's website actually lists a specific projectile. However, it is using Winchester cases, so we will need to compensate for the decreased case volume of 9.65 grains of water that our ADG Brass has from our Winchester case volume, which I've measured at least on mine, an average of 91.7 grains of water. One interesting detail when we're discussing coal is this is one of the very few projectiles that the load data actually list over SAMI maximum. Hodgdon actually lists the overall length of this projectile at 3.420 inches for this load, instead of SAMI's 3.34 inch max overall length spec. That particular overall length will still fit in our magazine, but it is only 50 thousandths left. And if you've been paying attention to our overall length testing, this is actually still, even though it's loaded long, 189 thousandths off of my lands according to my overall length gauge. At that max stated of 78 grains of H1000, our estimated velocity would be 2,869 feet per second. Obviously, we're getting on towards the max pressure of the case because the pressure estimated at that is 60,200 psi. So for today's test, we'll honestly be mimicking that pretty much as close as possible, except we'll be using ADG Brass. For our ADG Brass, this is its initial firing, so we will be fire forming during our test today. Our overall length will be, as stated in Hodgdon's website, our 3.420 inches. We are still going to use that same max load, and if we see too much pressure, we'll stop before we hit max, but I already know the ending, guys. We're going to get there. So essentially for today's testing, we'll be starting at 75.3 grains and working up in 0.3 grain increments all the way up to 78 grains of H1000. Our primer for today is the 215M Large Rifle Magnum Primer. As far as case prep was concerned, we did full length sizes and we set our neck tension at 2 thousandths with our Sinclair neck turning expander mandrel. Now before we get out to the range, please keep in mind, even though we are at this 3.42 inches, we are a very significant distance off the land, 190 thousandths basically. If we don't find accuracy, we won't really be too surprised. We can try loading out to magazine length or even possibly single feeding this projectile to see, but one of those things you're going to have to choose. We do have a very long throat on this. We've talked about it in previous videos, so we won't dwell on it too much, but this might not be the projectile for us, but we won't know until we test. And Fair warning, guys, I wish you would have told me before I shot these that my scope was loose, but you guys wanted to see the shooting, so here you go. Well guys, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed only seeing 8 shots show up on the cardboard there. If you've been following this series, you know that I did have a problem with my scope rings loosening up. One of the reasons why I swapped them out. One of 2 reasons. Honestly, I wanted to lower the scope base on this. I really had good luck with my Vortex scope rings, and so these Seekins actually makes them, and that's why I picked out these scope rings. So moving forward, we hopefully won't have any of these problems anymore. Obviously, there wasn't a significant vertical shift, just the horizontal as my scope was wiggling back and forth. So I'm convinced that we would have had better groups. We really would have liked to know what it was just to see what that brass improvement would have been with our groups before we got too deep into our load development. But all is not lost. The 2 things we really want to know was pressure and velocity today. So let's just put our velocity chart on the screen and you'll see, starting out at our 75.3 grain charge, we were at 2820 feet per second. All the way up at 78 grains, we actually hit 2,923 feet per second. Honestly, of all the graphs, this one's actually pretty nice. Looks like there might be some nodes to do some work up in, but a couple things to talk about before we get to that. Please keep in mind our estimated velocity actually at max was 2,869 feet per second, actually reaching 2923. That was a good 50 feet per second over our estimated velocity. Putting this information in a quick load, it does look like we were fairly significantly over pressure, so anything along that high velocity there, I certainly wouldn't recommend. Backing back down a little into normal levels, or at least that's what I'll call them, the 2880 that we expected, or around there, hopefully back in some type of a normal pressure range, anywhere from 76.8 all the way to 77.4 grains. We saw an extreme spread over 0.6 grains of only 7 feet per second. So honestly, we don't really like this projectile as far as the distance from the lands. However, that is a very nice velocity node if we can get repeatable velocity at that load. If not, looking further down the chart, we still have a few options here. All the way from 75.6 grains all the way to 76.2 grains. Looks like another very large velocity node with, again, extreme spread of only 7 feet per second. In my book, it doesn't get much better than that. Not exactly sure what our barrel times are. I haven't put into quick load to find out precisely what those are yet. But if we're going to look for some repeatable velocity, at least with the data on our screen, that's where we'd look at now. Since it looks like we were over pressure, let's take a quick look at our brass, and you can see really no significant pressure signs to speak of, at least that we can tell. Looking at the head on these cases, there really is no ejector marks whatsoever to indicate that there was any high pressure. There is primer cratering, as you can see. However, our factory brass has given us essentially that same primer cratering. Primers are a little bit flatter than I'd like to see, and with that velocity as high as it is, I really do think that we're pretty close, if not over the pressure limit for this case. So going up any further doesn't really look like a realistic solution moving forward. If you guys had any interest in our 8-shot group, it was actually 6.65 MOA. Again, losing 2 of the shots, so obviously it was much larger than that, but with the loose scope rings, at this point, I'm really not sure that it matters. As far as our workups are concerned so far, it really does look like there's some nice velocity nodes with this projectile. If there's really a couple places where we can see an extreme spread of 7, that would really be a nice velocity node and give us an idea if we could find some accuracy in there. However, it looks like we might actually have to load these things past magazine length, and single feeding isn't really what I wanted to do. I'd love to hear your opinions on that below. Would you like to actually see some load workups with this a lot closer to the lands? We'll actually test magazine length to see if we can get it to shoot there. But if it holds true to like the 220 grain series Match King, 20 thousandths off the lands is where this rifle really started shooting. As always, guys, I'd like to know what you think in the comment section below. But even if you're not into reloading 300 Winchester Magnum, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any comments or questions, please put those in the comment section below. If you want to make sure you keep up with this project, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you get notified when I post next week's video, and until then, stay safe in small groups.